Hello, everybody. You're watching Hear Me Out Podcast and Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. By now, you guys have already seen all the protests that are happening nationwide as a result of the murder of George Floyd by the hands of Officer Chauvin. Now, recently I came across an article in Mint Press News that I wanted to share with you guys if you haven't seen it yet. Pretty much, if other countries were doing what we're doing with our police, to the citizens of our country, and if the US wanted something from those countries, like the US corporations wanted oil or they wanted other resources from those countries that would benefit the corporations of the US, we would be painting the picture of how the country is killing its citizens, that it's authoritative, that it's fascist because they have a brutal police force that's killing its citizens, right? That we need to step in. We'd be calling it a Holocaust. Now, Mint Press News also published an article today by Lee Camp in which it was talking about that the police kills over 1,000 people per year. Meanwhile, in other countries like the UK, they kill only 3 people per year. And in other countries like Sweden and Denmark, they don't kill anybody at all. The police doesn't kill anybody at all. So clearly we have a problem in our country. And many of us are brainwashed to believe that this is normal. And it's not normal. This is injustice, and all those protests that you're seeing right now are understandable. If you want to hear more of my thoughts about this, then check out the last video that I have up on my channel that I did with my co-hosts for Hear Me Out Podcast, as well as our guest, Steve Pierce, SSC. This is clearly an injustice, and other countries will see it as an injustice as well. They're not doing this, like what we're doing with our police. So this article by Raul Diego talks about how the lawyers of George Floyd's family are open to opening up a United Nations human rights case, and they want to seek sanctions against the US. Now, I don't agree with sanctions because in the end, sanctions only harm the working class people. But at least they're trying to make an attempt to bring this to the awareness of the United Nations. Clearly, our country is not taking care of its citizens like they're supposed to. If there ever was a clear-cut case for human rights abuse, it is the ongoing and pervasive disregard for communities of color by the police and concomitant prison judicial complex in America. So the article talks about here in this section, the case for the ages. Lee Merritt and Benjamin Crump, attorneys for the families of the 3 victims of police brutality mentioned above, have announced that they intend to bring a case before the United Nations Human Rights Committee on behalf of their clients and seek sanctions against the United States for violating the human rights of African Americans. Should they be successful in this legal endeavor, it would be unprecedented and significant, but certainly not new. Other minority groups have attempted a similar attack, such as Native American community of Standing Rock, which tried but failed to bring a similar suit against the United States through the OAS in 2016. Another hurdle for Merritt, a civil rights attorney himself, and Crump, is the fact that Donald Trump pulled out of the United Nations Human Rights Council in 2018, leaving the question of how far-reaching any potential judgment in favor of the families may ultimately be. Nevertheless, taking advantage of the global spotlight that George Floyd's murder and the subsequent social unrest that it has brought upon the US to bring such a case before an international body like the UN may have a ripple effect throughout the world and open other avenues to hold the US accountable for its continued treatment of African Americans and other minorities. If there ever was a clear-cut case for human rights abuse, it is the ongoing and pervasive disregard for communities of color by the police and concomitant prison judicial complex in America. It is high time that the world looks at this country's track track record of these issues and does everything possible to stop it. And countries across the world have already recognized the injustice that our country commits on our minorities here. There are protests in France, there are protests in the UK. I'm sure there's other protests in other countries as well about what's going on here, because it's not normal. It's almost like this is also an act of terror. It's an act of terror on the citizens of this country, what the police is doing. You know, half of them are on steroids, half of them are veterans with PTSD. We need some serious reform in our police force system. And I'm open to discuss more about this with more guests to see how we can solve this problem. Like a way that we could do that is by, and I suggested this in my last video when I talked to Dee Pierce and my co-hosts Pedro and Brooks, is that we need serious education reform. In order for us to understand each other better, we need to have more spirituality and philosophy and psychology courses taught to us from an early age, and have required study abroad programs so that we can be better at understanding other people. But this is a human rights violation what the US is doing. You're just going around killing people for committing minor crimes. Meanwhile, we have all these Wall Street people and all these big industries harming our health by putting harmful chemicals in our food, lobbying to get into all these wars for oil, installing banks in other countries, US banks and other corporations in other countries. And then we steal the resources from all these other countries. So continuing on with the article, in the section called Keep the Pressure On. Even as the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police receives nonstop national and international coverage, the same behind-the-scenes forces that perpetuate the problem are working to deprive Floyd's family of the justice they deserve. From the outrageous coroner's report that partially attributed the death of a man executed on video to underlying health conditions and any potential intoxicants in his system, to the ridiculous third-degree murder charge initially levied on the killer, historical precedent demands that we not allow this to become another news story we remember the next time it happens. So, you know, we went out with Rodney King. There were riots then and protests, and then Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner is happening over and over again. And these are just one of thousands of cases that happen throughout the years. And then they try to save face, like, he was already preconditioned to die, or they don't have education. This is a thug. These are super predators, and we're supposed to vote according to Obama. He's suggesting we should vote for the author of the crime bill and the author of the Patriot Act. These politicians they're not here to protect you. They're there to protect the people who pay them, which are the corporate overlords. Wall Street, big oil, big pharma, Silicon Valley. Our country is in serious need of reform, of reparations. And like I said, neither of the two parties, the Democrats nor the Republicans, are going to do anything. They're not offering anything. So it's no wonder that people are acting desperate in combination with all the other stuff that's happening in our country. You know, our income gap getting bigger and bigger. People losing their jobs. We have the biggest unemployment that we've ever seen. People aren't able to pay rent. And so what do they have left to do? You know, in these poor communities, we deprive these people of proper education that they need. They don't understand how to organize systemically and like file organized lawsuits like what these lawyers are doing. And they see other people rioting as well or protesting, destroying things, and they're going to join them because that's just the way our psychology is built. This happened in 9/11 too. Many people were waving their American flags. They all felt like there was like a beehive effect. You know, people reacted together. And that's kind of how we feel right now. These people feel united right now with their anger and the injustice that they're feeling, and they want it to end. We want a country that's finally going to work for us. Is the UN going to give us that? Are they going to pressure the US to treat its citizens the way that they're supposed to? I highly doubt it. Just like the article mentioned, they didn't do anything about Native Americans when they filed the case. So what do we have left to do? Whether you're for violent or peaceful protests, I want you guys to stay tuned for a debate that I will be hosting this Friday between Dak Rulo and Jordan of the Yellow Brick Road, both of which have been on this show before. So it's going to be an interesting debate. Both sides are going to be talking about why they support, violent protests versus peaceful protests, which is going to be more effective, which has been more effective in history, and which direction should we go in the future. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe, you like, you share this video, and don't forget to stay informed. Thanks for watching that segment of Hear Me Out. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell down below so you can get the latest on sports, pop culture, and progressive politics. Stay informed.